choice. Pepper? Pepper? I've got a quick cosplay joke for you. So I've seen you last year. So what material should Mario's overalls be? Denim, denim, denim. Cool, alright. So my name's Vince Southwest.
I walked right into that one. I'll give you that.
You actually knew. As I said, I'm the creator of CrownRoot Publications. So CrownRoot has been the sponsor for this event for the last year. We went to every single one, and very proud for doing that. I came to this event for the first time 2 years ago, and it was just amazing, so I wanted to keep being involved inside of it. So basically, CrownRoot is the publishing arm of like a transmedial collective that we've got. Southwest was the first part of the organisation that was established, which we do film and music with. Epic Memory is where we do our animations from, and CrownRoot is where we make the comics. And this question mark is for the game side that we're going to be creating, hopefully releasing the first game by March. And so the aim is to train people, and for every aspect, so say we do a recording and audio for the music, that can be applied in both the animations and the games, and all of the crossovers kind of work in that fashion. So, okay. So yeah, this is kind of the feeling that I've had most of my life, and this is kind of who I'm trying to communicate with right now. Stories, narratives, feelings, trying to communicate them in one medium or another. So obviously this is about manga and anime, so that's what we're going to be looking at specifically. But the overall point is about communicating stories. And for me, it's about communicating the longer stories. So obviously, short stories are amazing, but as it relates to manga and anime, obviously they can get a little bit longer, a little bit more stretched. And me personally, even though it's harder, I still feel like it's just as possible to be able to achieve those sorts of things, especially in this day and age. No, that's all right. So how to make manga and anime. What I will say is that I'm going to be giving this talk every single event this year, and there are 10 events going on. And I want to make them slightly different as I move forward. So this one is going to be the baseline one. So if anybody here has already started production in their own anime or own manga, and you have any questions, obviously we'll be here, we can be contacted via email. But this particular talk is really for the people who maybe haven't started before and have just been thinking about getting involved in it. So it's how to make manga and anime 1.0. Nice one. Cool. So rule number 1 is make the first. Going across all of these cons over the last year, obviously this is a conversation that we're engaging with specifically with people about making stories. Obviously there are quite a lot of people who have engaged in it, but there are some people that I speak to that are so passionate about it, and they haven't engaged, they haven't done it, they haven't made something, but they spent a lot of time thinking about it. So that really is rule number 1. So the first idea, essentially, again, to people who have started, that might sound basic, but it's about really taking, I suppose it's a confidence thing, it's a pride thing, but really taking pride in the fact that your ideas do have value, and all of your favourite manga artists, all of your favourite manga story creators, anime creators, it did all start with an idea. So when you're thinking about that thing that comes to your head, you're watching something and you get it, it's just to take pride in that fact and indulge it. Just indulge it for whatever it's worth, whether it does manifest or it doesn't manifest, it's still worth taking pride in that. So the next thing is the first set of pre-production. Now, when you're watching a manga or an anime, if it's good, technically, I mean, it might be someone's opinions, but it's going to make you feel something. And sometimes when you have an idea, it's actually the feeling that you're trying to transfer. This is one of the reasons why the pre-production is so important in the first stage. It's just so that you can clarify what it is that you're trying to convey. Because sometimes you want to convey sadness, but actually when you start doing your pre-production, you realise that there's either holes in everything that you're doing, or actually, that's just Batman that I've created, and I need to actually do a little something extra. So by doing your pre-production, this counts as storyboarding, scripting, any sketching ideas that you have, any forms of audio recordings that you do, any sample animatics that you do, any form of pre-production that you do is going to help actually turn your idea from the initial inception into the feeling that you're trying to convey, and then you're going to start getting more into actual characters that are going to be inside of your world, the world itself, the stories that they go through, the timeline. So again, it's the same thing I was saying before about the idea. Take pride in the pre-production, no matter how silly it may feel that maybe on a Saturday night you're inside of your house sketching and mounting and everybody else is playing in the sun. All of your favourite artists have done something similar, and they had to take pride in what they were doing, and they also had to plan what they were doing, because you can't freestyle a manga, you can't freestyle an anime, you have to have some sort of planning to be able to do it. And then first edition. So this picture down here is the I've got my first edition dance. That's what that is. And again, it's about the follow through. So once you get to the first edition and you've made it, then you've made something and you've got it, and that's where you are. Pepper? So up here it says first edition. Spelling mistakes, too long, audio problems, wrong clothing, too short, colour slips, don't like the story anymore, don't like the characters anymore, thought of a better idea, not funny, not scary, too obvious, etc. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, when it comes to making your first, it is true you will never be able to get your first again, you'll never be able to do it again. But for example, it was at Alcon last year, I spoke to somebody who's saying, okay, we want to make some stories, I've got some stuff. It's like, oh, have you ever made a comic before? They were like, no, no, no. I was like, oh, how long have you been working on it? And they said 8 years. So for 8 years, they've been in the pre-production planning stage, and they never actually made their first edition. Now, at that point, you know you're not necessarily dealing with a production problem, and it is more of a psychological one. And the thing is, it might be that the only way you solve the problem is just by making the first edition and by putting yourself out there. It is hard, I know what it's like. It literally is like your baby, and it's very tender. But the things that you will learn from creating it, some of them can only be learned by doing it. Because it's a very creative process, but some parts of the process are very uncreative. And some of them are very mechanical. And those mechanics, you can only know that you've gone through the whole spectrum by actually doing it. So make the first edition, do the first edition dance, and it doesn't really matter what happens afterwards. Again, think about your favourite stories, and chances are it wasn't the first thing that they ever created. So it's just about getting yourself in the motions and getting yourself used to it. So, can't see it very clearly. This is Destiny Spectrum, so this is the story that I'm creating at the moment, and I'm just going to use it for an example to go through everything that I've just spoken about. We had a little talk about Kickstarters on Kickstarter now, but we won't go into that. Yeah. Cool. So in terms of the idea, the things that inspired me in terms of this idea, first was Powerpuff Girls. So I always just enjoyed the fact that everybody I know likes Powerpuff Girls, but it's got female main characters and they are feminine, but at the same time it could have been 3 guys doing it. So from a kid, that's always stood out as a very kind of unique way of delivering a narrative. They don't usually do it like that. Dragon Ball is my favourite anime, so I wanted to have a similar sort of epicness to it. The fact that Dragon Ball goes cross-generational, and by the end Goku's actually a granddad, and it goes from being on planet Earth to a universal scale, and now we've got multiverses and all of that sort of stuff. So I really like just the length of it. I think that a lot of stories are that big, but because that was the one that I first consumed, that's what I associate it with. In the bottom over here, we have Full Metal Alchemist. So the way that the science and magic works within Full Metal Alchemist is something that I wanted to bring into mine. So they do actually have magic in what they're doing, but it's more from a scientific kind of perspective. And then over there is an image by an artist called Destiny Blue, and you can't actually see it that clearly in the projection, but what it is it's a girl who's crying and her tears are scarring her face. So I just really like that as a concept. And that image was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. When I thought of that, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I contacted Destiny Blue. I said, can I use that idea for my story? She said yes. So I called it Destiny Spectrum, kind of in honor of that. And inside of that world, that's what happens. When they cry tears of sadness, it scars their face, and if they cry tears of happiness, the scars will go away. So those were all of the kind of feelings and themes and concepts that I wanted to try and convey in this story that I was creating. Okay, so now we've got my pre-production. Here we have the world that I created and kind of got that professionally made. On the other side, we've got some of the templates for some of the items that I made, and down here we've got some character design. I know it's a little bit hard, but I think I'll put this video up on YouTube if anyone wants to see it. And in the bottom right, we have some of the pre-production for the front cover. So yeah, pre-production can need its own pre-production. So again, this is going to come down to how serious that you're taking your story. This is probably it's the fourth StoryWorld that I've created that is mine, and I'm kind of involved in editing everybody else's that we're doing. So by this point, I take what I do very seriously, even though somebody might look at me and just think I'm watching anime all day. So for each bits of these pre-production, there was pre-production, which usually involves my rubbish drawings first of all, then I'll send it to someone, or Connor over there who's filming. He does, he's a hell of a lot better artist than me, so we'll go through a couple of stages, then I'll find somebody online or somebody that I know that can execute it perfectly, and that's just for the elements for me, to help me kind of know what I'm thinking when I'm thinking it. So it helps me to be able to see my characters' faces physically, not just inside of my head as I'm developing things, creating the world. When planning out actually what happens, I wanted to make sure that I didn't get caught out with, well, it took them 4 days to travel to this part, but it only took them 2 days to travel to there, and being able to work out the whole kind of ecology, the way that socially it all works. And just to say that within, like I kind of said at the beginning, I'm very much about trying to encourage people to world build and to create the epic worlds, because a lot of us are fans of huge universes like The Hobbit and Marvel, DC, Shonen, but there just seems to be a bit of a barrier that people have to say, oh, I could never do something like that. But ultimately, they're just ideas. So that's what we encourage. And, you know, some people have whole lists of military weapons that they do. Some people do timelines. But again, it's all what's relevant to your story. Pepper. So, and then here's the first edition. So again, it's a little bit of a production line. Here is my amazing drawing here, which I'm glad you can't really see. And then you go on to sketch pencils, then colouring, and then final colours and text on the right there. So, as I said, this comic, Destiny Spectrum, is going to be available in May. And if you want to pre-order it, you've just got to go onto the Kickstarter. So rule number 2 is don't get stuck on the pre-production. Like I was saying before, once you actually get to the point where you do have a chance to communicate what you've done to somebody else, you don't have to constantly be saying it. You can put bits of paper in front of them so you can say, okay, this is what the character looks like, and this is what's going to happen. Now, one thing that I would say that is a really good way to not get stuck on pre-production is to literally create what it is that you're creating, but in a different format. So if you were creating a manga or a comic, I would say write out that episode in script format. Because it's kind of annoying, but at the same time, once you've done that and you're so close to the edge, I find that if somebody's making a comic and they've got a script, or if somebody's making an anime and they've got a comic, it doesn't usually sit in the pre-production stage for that long, because it's so close to the edge, they usually get it done. It's when you're a lot further back and it's more closer to your idea stage. So again, I just wanted to emphasize that. If you've come that far and you've planned something out, just make your first edition and get it out there. Cool. So again, Destiny Spectrum, the anime, same idea. So this was the pre-production for the anime side of it. So here we have the character again. It was just about communicating. I was communicating with a different artist So when I was making the pre-production for the comic, I got about 6 or 7 concept images created for different parts of what was happening in the story. The anime had a particular concept image. I sent that image over to the person who was designing it in Japan. They then came back to me with their version of it, which was actually a lot better. Because there was a bit of a language barrier, we were communicating in visuals and in pictures most of the time. So down here is a timeline for the animation, which is only 8 seconds long, but like I said, first edition doesn't matter. Those images were all separate and were all parts of different things where I was like, oh, can you make it look like this? I didn't quite understand. They gave me a couple of versions, and then I tried to kind of piece together which parts were right, whilst always as well given like the technical language which goes along with it. So in terms of creating manga and creating anime, the big difference is that manga and comics you can physically do on your own. I mean, I think Akira, story, sketches, inks, colour, he did everything. It's physically possible, and if I could draw, I'd probably do that. But when it comes to anime, that's something that you can't do on your own, and communication is key, no matter how it is that you want to decide. So establishing a set of terminology is always going to be useful, or at least asking who it is that you're trying to communicate with, what do you call this, finding other examples, finding baseline examples, and then building upon that. And then as you continue working, you'll basically find your own framework within it. So this is how we choose to communicate. Again, I do random little drawings, they do better ones of that, and then I pick what they've done to be able to do it. So this is the next one, and this is where we get technical. So this is the 2 frames from the animation, and if the gremlins don't hate me, so if we wait a couple of seconds. So that was Palestine being a psycho going into the middle of a war. So again, it was just 8 seconds, and we've made some other animations in a different style afterwards, a bit more of a sprite thing. But again, for me, that was important. As somebody who wants to make animations, and not just animations, I want to make anime-style animations. It was important for me to have that prototype there. I've been through the whole process. I know what it takes on a mechanical level. I know what it takes on a creative level, and it means that moving forward and designing things in the future, I have a very real kind of notion of what it's going to take. So I know how much money and how long it took me to make 8 seconds. So even though I do want to make a 25-minute one in the future, I know what it's going to take to have to get to that. So rule number 3 is kill your babies. So once you've made something and you spent all that time and you've designed the ideas and then you spent months doing your pre-production and then you put the first edition out there and then you've got all the really great feedback from it, don't be afraid to just kill the baby and start again. And I kind of force it on the people that work with me, just because I think it's good practice. I think that it's amazing to spend all of your time in something, but the beauty of making the first edition is I say kill your baby, but you're not actually killing anything. All I'm saying is, okay, leave that for a second, and let's try and do it again. Now, one of the reasons why I think that's so beneficial, using me for an example, the first story world I created was called Indigo Babies, and it's what's called a first world parallel. So it's based more in the world that we exist now. It's literally set in Bristol where I live. It was based on riots that I actually filmed. It's kind of like, it's got people that I know inside of it within the Bristol community, and then it's kind of got a little edge of like superhero on top of it. So it was very real, and so I could go and get my inspiration from physical places. Go here, take a photo, that goes inside of the comic. By doing Destiny Spectrum, I decided to go on the complete other side. Where they live isn't Earth, they're on a completely different planet, it has completely different physics, they're all giants, their science works completely differently, and by giving myself the mental freedom to do that, creatively, it was good to make Destiny Spectrum, but it also helped me with Indigo Babies to be able to have something that is completely different. And then I had two different things that I can gain inspiration from. So when I see something, it's not about me trying to cram what feels like a good idea into Indigo Babies, even though it doesn't work. I've got a few different things to kind of go with. And it also, what it helped me do as well, is it made me a better editor in what I'm doing. So when I started designing Destiny Spectrum, that was completely different. I saw all of the flaws that were inside, even Indigo Babies. The main one being that in that comic, every single page, something different happened. There were big paragraphs. I could only see that when I was designing Destiny Spectrum and how simple I was making it and how much easier it was to digest. So with Indigo Babies, I made an animation for the part 2 anyway, but when I do go back to the comic, it will be a hell of a lot better just because of that. And also, you can get something similar by helping somebody out with their own story as well. So if you know somebody else who's creating a story world, by getting fully involved in what they're doing, you give yourself that opportunity. So yeah, just again, have faith in your ability to create ideas. Most people that I know who want to design manga and anime, it isn't necessarily because they've got a one single burning desire. It's because they watch a lot of different stuff and they're constantly getting inspired by it to create different things. But because of the mammoth task that it is to create a comic or an anime, people hone in on one single idea and they kind of feel like that's their saving grace. I've known people who have had an idea and then they've seen something come out similar that looks like their idea, and that's them. They don't want to do it anymore. It's completely over for them. When, you know, I do believe that if you've got ideas, you've got ideas. And, you know, even though you might not be getting paid millions of pounds to do it right now, if you think that it's something that you could have done, so if you could wake up in the body of somebody who works in Shonen Jump and be responsible for new things coming out, then you should be able to apply the same amount of passion into what you're doing. So again, for that reason, I think it's a good test to get something out and then try and at least get to the pre-production stage of another thing that you're creating. So rule 3.5 is you can always revive them. So these are images from Connor, who's sitting over there, who works with us, and the top line is images that were created before I killed his first baby, and the bottom line are ones from afterwards. So it's kind of a bit hard to see, but essentially there's a lot of development that has happened, and by starting off with a certain level, creating what we can create, ideas, pre-production, first editions, making it happen, then after that saying, okay, now we're going to make something completely new. This one in the bottom in the middle was the new thing that we created, well, new thing that he created, and then after that we went back to the original ones and then we remade them again. And essentially everything just came out better for everything that we've learned along the process, because you can't unlearn things. So again, you're not really killing anything, but you're just giving yourself a bit of a breathing space from something that you've probably spent a lot of dark nights inside of. So rule number 4 is join a community. So these are the front covers from 4 of the titles that we have. We've got Destiny Spectrum here. We've got Trinity Witches, which is Connor's, which is another first world parallel set in Japan and across the globe, in where there are magic users and it becomes a bit of a crime. We've got Skin Deep, which is one that I've made, which is a kind of completely non-magical narrative based around a girl called Ariane Miyamoto, who became the first mixed race Miss Japan. And then we've got Mechanism at the end, which is created by somebody who we met at the Bristol Anime Con, and that's his first edition. So we should have had them here, but I won't go into that because I can't control the Nine Tails. So yeah, next. Join a community. Again, Anime League is a community in and of itself. So in terms of the people here, I know for a fact by talking to people that this is a very, very welcoming and very open to community. And if you did have something on you, whether it was an idea, pre-production or a first edition, I'm pretty sure that you could roll up to 99% of the people in this room and around the building and that they would communicate with you and give you a level of feedback on what you're doing, which is why we connected with them. In terms of CrownRoot itself, we have about probably about 12 to 15 people involved in what we're doing directly. 4 of them sell our comics full-time, so we mainly go around the southwest of England selling the comics daily, but we also obviously come to these cons and we sell them as well. And the rest of them are artists at the development, and we've also got some storytellers. So we take people in on whatever level they are. We really prize out of them what it is that we want to get from them, because as I said, sometimes it's kind of under layers of underconfidence, and we get out what it is that they're actually trying to do. From that point, we do our best to help them with the pre-production phase, and then we get the first edition out. So in terms of first editions, we'll pretty much publish anything of yours the first time, as long as it's not vulgar. And then from that point, once we've made your first edition and you've gone through that process, that's when we'll go back and start looking really critically at what you're doing, and hopefully you'll be willing to engage with that. So yeah, all of those will be available on the website, which will be out next week. If you go on there now, CrownRoot Publications, there's only Indigo Babies there at the moment. So yeah, that is it. Is there any questions for making an anime and manga 1.0? Is there anything there? Okay, one more slide. Cool, so that's my email if anybody wants to get in contact, vince@southbless.co.uk. If you look on the back of any of your pamphlets, the CrownRoot logo's on there, and it's CrownRoot Publications for the email, and I hope you have a good rest of your con.
Well, basically, these are the 3 actual anime companies that I'm working with, and these are examples of the work that they have shown me. So basically, what I want to do is I literally just want to find out from people which ones do you think are the best. Now, I'm just going to say straight off the bat, they're all sick, yeah, like, that's a standard, but, you know, from the people who are in my network, I want to get the critical eye from you and why you think one is better than the other. So, I hope you're having a blessed day. I definitely am. These are sick, but tell me which one is sick. Who wants to play? Who wants to play? Who wants to play?